Welcome to The Golden Hour, a podcast about aging, dignity, and the people who refuse to let either be forgotten. I'm Liz Keller, case manager, licensed realtor, everyday mom and wife, and a lifelong advocate for seniors. Here, we'll share stories that matter, bust myths, and open up honest conversation about what aging with dignity really looks like. Because our seniors deserve better, because here, no senior is left behind. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for reaching back out to me to come on. Can you guys just tell me, well, introduce yourself, how long you've been doing it, and what exactly your roles are?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. My name is Angela Van Pelt, and I am the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman. So I am in charge of the office here in the state of Iowa. I have 12 full-time staff, and I have been doing this role since June of 21. So right after COVID, I started in this position. Prior to that, I worked with the Department on Aging as the PIO legislative liaison, and I have experience in research and policy at the state and federal levels. But I'm super excited to be in this work and in this role. I have a great team. We do some really, really good work, and we're excited to be able to share that with you.
Yeah, we're excited too to hear from you. So, yes, let's, Melanie, what is your role?
Yes, so I'm Melanie Kempf. I serve as our program manager for quality and process improvement. I've been with the Long-Term Care Ombudsman's office for 16 years. Prior to this role, I was a local ombudsman for 15 years. And so have the experience and have been able to come into this role to really help move our office forward on various things. Prior to working for the Long-Term Care Ombudsman's office, I was a licensed nursing home administrator and really began working in long-term care when I was 14 as an environmental aide. So it's been a part of my life.
Right, yes. Okay, that would be like housekeeping, right?
Yes.
Okay, yes. When I go into buildings, I see another gal on the wall. Who is that? And how is she different than whatever it is that you do, Angela?
So, well, you're probably seeing a picture of one of our local long-term care ombudsmen.
Okay.
So the state of Iowa is divided into 9 regions currently, and each region has a local long-term care ombudsman that serves all the facilities in that area largely. So that's
you're
probably
over
who you see. Yes, yep, I'm the head of the whole office.
Okay. So we literally went straight up the flagpole. This is fantastic.
You did. You got the top. So whether that's a good or a bad, this is who you have me. So
I want to know everything that you have to share. So I want to know exactly what it is that you guys are patrolling. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's the word I'm going to use for this situation because I think it's self-explanatory. And what it is that you're watching over and what your, I guess, all of the details. So I have a better idea before I ask questions of what it is that you guys do on a day-to-day basis.
okay, so I'll just start off kind of just giving you kind of that broad brush overview. So the charge of our office is to provide individual and systemic advocacy for individuals residing in long-term care facilities. So like nursing facility, assisted living, elder group homes. There's some residential care facilities that we don't cover that specialize in like primary mental illness or intellectual disability, but largely anything that's a long-term care facility, we would provide advocacy services to. And that's where we have the locals go out. They advocate at the direction of the resident. So that's one thing that's very unique with us. Secondarily, we are not the regulator. We are not the Department of Inspection, Appeals, and Licensing. So we don't do the surveys. So a lot of the articles that you read are results of surveys. And that's actually, they're going in and they are evaluating the conditions and the staff and all of that. And Melanie's been through those, and she actually can probably speak to that end of it better than I can. But we don't do that. We provide advocacy at the direction of the resident, which is another very interesting concept because that may vary from a family member or someone else that would call in with a complaint or a concern that we would work with them, but we would work at the direction of the resident. So if the resident does not want to, for example, report a situation of abuse, and the family member does, we would stay with the advocate, stay with the resident, and do what they want to do. So there's some dynamics that are different than what people's perception might be. And then the confusion between us and the regulatory entities, like we're not adult protective services. That's a whole different area. So those are more regulatory. We'll call them more regulatory agencies. We are strictly advocacy. So while we work on bridging gaps or improving communication or advocating for the resident, oftentimes we're going to encourage them to speak up and advocate. So we do a lot of empowering, information sharing, but then direct advocacy if that resident isn't comfortable in doing that. We also work with individuals on Medicaid managed care, so members that receive Medicaid managed care, that receive long-term services and supports. So that's largely going to be individuals in facilities or on one of the 7 HCBS waivers, home and community-based waivers. And then we do systemic advocacy. So we're really looking at the system as a whole. So we're going to regulate policy, law at the federal and the state level. We'll get involved there. We just recently, over the last 3 years, have done grassroots campaigning with residents to increase their personal needs allowance, and that's all through the legislature here in Iowa. So we go through that process. So really it's the individual advocacy as well as systemic advocacy.
That's interesting. So from my understanding is if, let's say, little Miss Smith is in a community and she's just not feeling like the community is listening to her or, like things are going on and she just doesn't have support, she would be the person that would call in to that local number and then they would come and kind of help advocate for her. Is that an example, or are you able to give me? Go ahead.
Yeah, we would take a complaint or a concern from any individual. So it wouldn't have to be just the resident. So we could get it from a family member. We have the ability to make complaints based on what we see and what we observe in the facility while we're there. So anybody can give the complaint, but we will always follow the direction of the resident. So does that help answer that a little bit? It wouldn't be just the resident. It could be anybody that could call in with a concern. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that we would help with. Melanie, do you want to pipe in there? Because
I would say sometimes the complaints are against the facility. Sometimes complaints are against the Medicaid agency. Their application's not getting processed quick enough, or there are issues with that. Sometimes the complaints are against the legal decision maker, a guardian or a power of attorney who's put in place. And that's the really neat thing about our role is we get to be in that gray area and we get to advocate and help be the voice for the individual.
Yes, that is actually very helpful to know. Tasha, do you have anything to add or any questions based off of what they've said and being in that space?
Probably more of out of curiosity, like what would be your number one complaint, especially somebody living in an assisted living community or a long-term care nursing home, just because I've been in that space before. And I'm a true believer in advocacy, and as much as I want to save everybody, I always encourage everyone to contact the Ombudsman because that is, I think that's one of the things I love is having the advocacy for those residents in that setting. So what would you say, your number one or most common ones in those type of space?
So I think pretty consistently we see issues of care. So that would be things like call lights not being answered, people are not getting attended to. So just basic care, anything related to care. Secondarily to that, it's usually autonomy, choice, rights. And then third, we're seeing discharges, evictions. So think of all the closures that you've heard about in the last several years, as well as involuntary discharges. We do a good number of involuntary discharges. So those are kind of the top 3 categories that we get the largest amount of work in.
I would agree, and I would say the short staffing equivalates to the care concerns that we receive. And for our office, we are required to receive every involuntary discharge notice. So
What do you mean by involuntary? Can you explain that?
Sure. So involuntary means that the facility, whether it's the assisted living program or the nursing facility or the residential care facility, they are asking the resident to leave has to be very certain reasons that are outlined in state and federal regulation. There are only certain conditions that they can involuntarily discharge someone. And so we focus on it's your right to be here unless it falls in that category and unless you would choose not to appeal or lose an appeal and then need to find alternate placement.
That's interesting because I have my social work degree and I worked as a CNA way back like you, Melanie. I started in that space when I was 18, and then I went into real estate. So now, just at the beginning of this year, I came back into the senior space. And so I'm honestly trying to tread lightly right now at all of the things that I'm seeing that are things that are like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Why is this happening? And I feel like I need to get my feet a little bit more wet before I really start questioning things because, like, for example, I see these communities taking residents in that probably shouldn't have been placed there at the very, very beginning. They burn through 2 years of money and then all of a sudden they're like, well, you're not a good fit here anymore because they've been grandfathered in, for their 2-year private pay and now they have to go to Medicaid. You're not a good fit here anymore because we think that maybe you have some memory problems or you are calling the staff names. However, it doesn't feel like that was a problem up until the point that when Medicaid, needed to kick in. And now we've burned 2 years worth of private pay in this space that Mr. Smith has to now go to a Medicaid only place because we've just burned through that 2 years of private pay to grandfather him in. That's something that I feel like is gross in a way of like, you knew that this was going to be Mr. Smith's fate and you waited until you got through his private pay money before you said, hey, we can't take you on. Is that something that I should expect as common to see?
I think I would say, and Mel, go ahead and clarify when I'm done babbling. I think I would say that part of the issue systemically is the fact that Medicaid does not cover the cost of rent in assisted living facilities. So unfortunately, we do see people that have to burn through all of their resources, and then they get to the point where they're on Medicaid and their choices are limited. Now, we do get reports of people having been admitted and told that they were going to be able to stay. And then you're right, that change occurs and they are not able to stay. Melanie, I don't know if you want to pipe in with any specific situations, but the reality, again, of that is assisted livings largely don't take the Medicaid payment for rent or that expense. Now, you can have HCBS services in an assisted living facility, but that's not going to cover the bulk of the actual cost to physically live there. So that's definitely a systemic problem because there are a lot of people that could be successful if they were able to stay in an assisted living facility, as long as they didn't cross that threshold of where their ADLs are higher than what allows them to stay in an assisted living. Melanie, do you want to comment?
I would just piggyback on that to say that assisted living programs in the state of Iowa are tenant landlord based. And so you have an occupancy agreement and you have loose language in there sometimes that indicates they may accept this number or percentage of individuals on Medicaid, and they may change those policies with a 30-day notice. And so along the lines of what Angela shared, that's a little bit of the systemic issue that we're hearing about now. It is a financially solvent issue that the assisted livings are not making money. And so yes, you may have an individual who's lived there for years and they run out of funds and then are forced to move.
Would you ever say that would change in how that whole process down the road, hopefully?
So that change would require a huge shift. So there are some states, and I can't tell you who exactly. I think California is maybe one of them. They have subsidies that they will choose to pay. So it would have to be some funding source that would be dedicated to, for example, picking up that rent cost. Now, that's not necessarily a bad idea, right? I mean, if you think about it, let's say that there's a subsidy of even $1,000 or $2,000 a month that the state kicks in or whatever kicks in. You're talking about that person being able to stay there, significantly longer because their resources will last longer. But that would be a huge lift. And I don't think a lot of states go down that trajectory. Not that it wouldn't be a great policy, and it's needed. There needs to be something that bridges that gap between nursing facility level of care and assisted living care, or being in your home with enough supports to be able to be alone, or supported enough to validate you staying there safely. So I would love to see that happen. I would totally love to see that happen. I just think there's a lot of states that struggle with that same exact issue because it's a huge gap. And unless we have home and community-based services that are everywhere for everybody in an equitable way, we're always going to have people that hit that middle zone where all of a sudden now they're out of money. They may not need nursing facility level of care, but if they have to go on Medicaid, they're limited in their choices again. So completely agree. Great concept. Mm-hmm. We're all for that.
And it keeps individuals in their home. It keeps them in a lower level of care, which goes along with home and community-based services, keeping people in the setting that they want to be in, not having to move to the nursing home to share a room with someone when you just came from having your own apartment, for example.
Yeah, and I completely get that. I want people to stay in their home, obviously, as long as possible. But sometimes I feel like we over-exaggerate that a little bit to the point that people stay way longer than what they should because they feel like that's what we're supposed to do. You're supposed to basically just wither away in your home because you're supposed to age in place and save the equity and, not have someone else take care of you. But I think that it's becoming problematic to the point that people are endangering themselves staying in their home as long as they are. And it's like they're hurting themselves because they're falling, breaking a hip, and then we're in more hospital stays, or they're not drinking. And then, we end up going down the UTI path. And there's just so many things that happen when they're alone. And let's not even talk about the loneliness that they have sitting there by themselves. I mean, all of us, I'm sure, have families at home that are constantly touching us and talking to us and engaging us. And can you imagine going weeks on weeks? And some of these seniors do. We all know this, go weeks without a family that shows their face, and they can't get out of the house and go to church. That I would love to see everybody age at home, but it's such a sad thing if you think about these widows, both sides, men and women, that just sit at home by themselves. They're sad. They don't go back out into public. Their family's not coming around. And they just die kind of alone. So yeah, I have something, and that's not because I'm moving into this space of like getting in placements. I'm actually doing it because I want more people to get out of their home, even coming from real estate, because I hate to see all of these people just alone in their house. And I think it's just in our human nature to be able to have community and not be isolated. So that's a whole discussion of itself. I don't know how I went down that rabbit hole, but the communities, it'd be great if they could fill up. And I think that if community is filled up and we didn't have this like occupancy war, we would have less competition on like people doing the right thing. So I think that that's really what my questions are, is when you go out into the community and you see things happening that shouldn't be happening, what are the most common things? I know that we talked about that a little bit, but can you give me specific examples of, without, obviously we don't need like specific identity things, but what is it that you guys see most commonly? And if you could change it today, what would that be?
I think I would say increased staffing that equivalates to improved quality of care, because an increased staffing can also mean increased training and empathy for those who reside in facilities, because there's so much burnout in the industry. It's a very hard job. You've been there, you've done that. And so when you compile comorbidities of individuals who live there with maybe they don't want to be in a facility anyway, You get staff who are stressed out, burnt out, high rates of turnover. So I would focus on staffing first. And that in itself is kind of a loaded question, because when you think of long-term care, you think regulators, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. You think Department of Inspections, Appeals, and Licensing, OSHA. You think HR issues. There's a whole gamut where staff are just stressed a lot of the time. So I think if you could make it a better workplace, it would also in tune become a better home-like environment for those who receive care there.
Oh, for sure, 100%. I remember in 2006, I would say there was 45 residents on each side, and we would only have 3 CNAs on each side, and then of course an LPN that didn't really help with like the actual ADLs. They were there to just make sure everyone got their meds and whatever. But holy cow, the weight of that, because we didn't have a shower aid, but it was 3 aides. I worked second shift that we would get there, and then we'd have to get everybody to the bathroom, and then we'd have to get them down to dinner, and then we would feed them, especially the ones that had to have that, and then back to their rooms to get everyone on to the bathroom to have our list of showers and then get everyone to bed. It was so heavy. I don't even know if that's legal. I don't even what is the ratios anymore for that heavy of a load. And it's a lot, and it becomes, yes, a burnout to say,
So I want to piggyback on that just a little bit. I want to kind of take us down a little bit of a different path, but it's related. And I think what we need to see more of are businesses that are willing to look into smaller model facilities. So greenhouse projects, facilities that actually look like a home that hold 8 people. They eat meals together. They help make meals together. They build community at a whole different level. Staff are satisfied, because they're in a whole different environment. Or the intergenerational models, when you think of a daycare merged with a assisted living facility, right? So co-locating. So there's opportunities for interaction, and there's benefit to both parties, right? The kiddos that don't have grandparents close by get an interaction, and those elderly people get interaction with young kids. I think, we really need to try to encourage people to embark on adventures like that, because we're talking about community, right? And you can go into an assisted living, you can go into a long-term care facility and still feel completely alone, right? So there's like a lot of different factors. We like to, and we are actively starting to engage family councils, which are people that are, getting together on the outside that have loved ones in a facility, and they're talking about things and trying to advocate for a better quality of life. There's resident councils in facilities that we encourage them to talk amongst each other, talk about your issues and talk about the problems. And then as a whole, try to advocate for, improvements. So I think there's a lot of different ways when we talk about community. What does that look like? Because I agree, there's so many people that are in their home just slowly deteriorating, and it's not healthy for them either. But we've got to kind of get out of the mentality that the only options are these large facilities, that are operating largely, a lot of them at censuses that aren't functional. So how can we be creative? How can we be innovative in the way that we approach community and the needs of children as well as the aging? I think there's a lot of room to kind of figure that space out. And we've had a few pilots in Iowa that are starting to look at those things. But I think there's a lot of ways to look at it.
I'm very curious on this because Iowa is not a state that has a lot of these smaller residential. I know there's a few scattered in residential neighborhoods where they, renovated a residential house into like what you're explaining. I don't think there's that many. Are there?
No, and the thing of it is I think if you look at them, so like the Eden Project is one that models a lot of this. Pioneer, greenhouse projects. It really is this smaller model of living. Now, I'm going to tell you, it's not necessarily less expensive.
No.
But it definitely offers a higher quality of life. You look at residents that are living there longer, healthier, and just an overall different different environment that promotes positivity. And it's more manageable and it's more home-like. I think being in a long-term care facility, a lot of them unfortunately are older. They need a lot of repairs, and like I said, a lot of them are sitting at lower census numbers, so they're not even full. It just becomes kind of this behemoth to try to navigate the remodeling aspect of it, to do anything to bring it up to date. And so I think of all the cost in that, and and then the cost you have to have it staffed appropriately. I just think there's different models that I would really encourage the state to look at moving forward. We still have a lot of facilities. We have a lot of nursing facilities, especially in Iowa. We have less now, but I definitely hope we can get on the trajectory where we're learning more about these smaller models of living.
So that's really good to know, because we do work with investors, and I have been for quite some time. And one of them, a lot of them are itching to find a place to put their money in Iowa, of doing these smaller things that you're talking about. But I haven't been well versed on the education of the need. But if you're saying that like this is something that Iowa's kind of itching and craving for, that's definitely something that I would love to go down, because I know that there are investors that are like, hey, let us know if the need exists in Iowa, because we would love to do this. What would you say, is it like do you think like a 10 resident, like a 10 bedroom home would be like what the ideal thing is that you're talking about? Like, is that the smallness of?
I think they vary. I think they probably hover more around 8, maybe 8 to 12 in the ones that I've read about, and I'm definitely not an expert in this area. I just know that there's a lot of discussion about it. I do know, though, that it's not necessarily a savings, and that sometimes tends to be, what decision makers look at more than anything else, which is the sad part, right? But the realistic part.
You're going to be paying the same amount of money, but for better care potentially. So it's a savings when it comes to
right. When you look at the flip side, right? Return of investment for quality of life and quality of care. People living.
And in those neighborhood and household concepts, the staff are cross-trained. And so they're helping with all different sorts. They're not only your CNA, they might be doing your laundry. They might also be sitting down and having a family style meal with you. And they're also doing recreation. And they might do transportation. But it's very much more family and home-like.
Yeah. And I love that, because I think that it just gives those widows, like, let's be honest, I feel like it's the problem of the loneliness is coming from the young ladies way back when that left their parents' home and straight to their husband's house.
Mm-hmm.
They were with their husband, they raised their family, and then their kids left, and then their husband has recently passed away. And now they're sitting there like, I don't know what to do. I've cared for people my whole life. I've never been alone. And I don't want to say my kids deserted me, but like the kids aren't there to take care of all of her needs, whether they moved away or not. And they just want someone to talk to. I don't even think they're not like looking to get remarried. So that's like not, I think that maybe they think that's the only way to ever have another companion is to remarry. And this way is not. You could literally get in a house with a bunch of girlfriends and live your best life.
I think we also see that this is the generation that does not want to burden their children. I have an old neighbor who is presently living in a nursing facility in Iowa, and going to see her recently, she said, I could leave here anytime. I just don't want to do that to my children because they would be taking care of me.
Yeah, I don't know. That's sad to me that that's what they think.
Right.
It truly is.
I was just going to say, I think there's so many dynamics, I think there are facilities that do really good work, right? They're finding creative, innovative ways to meet the need. They are finding ways to keep staff, and not have high turnover. So and there is a need, right, for all of the levels of care. There's a need for support in the community, a need for a secondary level of support, assisted living. There's a need for the nursing facility, right? And in Iowa, we just need to figure out how to balance all of that out. So we have this system that's robust at every level, so the needs are met. So but it is hard work. And to Melanie's point, the staffing issues are significant, and I think there need to be some really creative ways to how do you bring more staff in without just increasing a wage, right? Like, are there other incentives you can offer to them? Can you offer daycare? Can you offer some kind of a stipend for daycare? Or, can you do something differently? Because staff is the key to so many of these quality issues, as well as solid administration, right? We just see so much turnover at every level, social work administrators, as well as the frontline staff.
That's actually genius. Like if a community had just a daycare that's just for staff's kids, and there's some kind of perk of bringing your kids there, but then also the kids are interacting, with the like whether they're doing Christmas concerts or weekly kit, whatever it is. I feel like that would be one. I would love to live there because you'd get to see little kids, but two, it would be so easy to just take your kid to work and take them into the daycare there and yeah, I do. That's a good idea.
In conjunction with that is the concept of adult daycare and daycare centers together, right? So think about that. Think about the sandwich generation that's taking care of kids as well as parents in the home, and then they have a solution of both. So I'm hopeful for the future. I think when we have different levels and different options, I don't know. I think there's a lot of good still to be done out there.
Oh, there needs to be a little bit of a shakeup, I think, in the senior community. The one thing I've heard a lot was this is how we've always done it, and I think that phrase is now burning my ears because we can't continue to say that we have to evolve, we have to get creative, we have to change what we're doing to make it work. And I think that's for sure. So one of the residential homes here said that there was this confusion between like the person that owns the house is not able to be the nurse in the house. It was like, can you tell me a little bit about that? Do you know if that's the case, if there has to be a difference in ownership in cares or?
So there have been situations where individuals have not been licensed or certified. But if you have so many people who are living together who are unrelated, then that might cause concern for the state. So that could have been what the issue was there. I do know we have had those mom and pop nursing facilities, and I have seen one of the owners be the administrator, the other one be an assistant, and the other one be a director of nursing, and the other one be the MDS coordinator. So that has been possible in a nursing facility. My guess is that what you're speaking about might have been an unlicensed home.
Okay, that's interesting. I love hearing what the needs are and what you guys would like to see because that's great. And there are super centers going up if that's what we want to call them. They're like mega communities.
The continuum of care facilities. So like they start out with independent living and then they advance to assisted living. I think Western Community Homes is a pretty significant operation like that. They do all kinds of service levels, but yeah, there's a lot of options actually.
I can understand that one though too, because if you have you have your private pay money and you have 2 years only, and then after your 2 years, you can stay there and go through the whole rest of the system on Medicaid, then, that it's just lots of options.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's advice that you guys would give to us as far as like, if you see this, say something, or, this will happen and you won't be able to do anything about it?
I think that the biggest thing is if you have a loved one in a facility that you need to make a point to be there and paying attention to what's going on, and then just speaking up and asking. There are so many basic rights that individuals have that people just don't think about. They think, well, they're now in a facility, it's the facility's schedule, it's the facility's rules, and to an extent that's true, right? But there are a lot of things that you can ask for, right? There's supposed to be care planning being done that is personalized and centered on the person's need, individual need. So I think it's that matter of being involved, asking the questions, and it can be as simple as, can my mom not be sitting at the nursing station with everybody else for, 30 minutes after she just got done with surgery and needs to be resting in her room, right? Just like ask the question, and see what happens. I think people just give in a lot of times and assume this is just the way it needs to be. So that's kind of the practical part of that. Mel, what do you think?
Tasha, do you want to go first or do you want me to jump in?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I would offer a few things. Our services are free and our services are confidential. So if I were to give you any piece of advice about our office and the long-term care sector, it would be it's okay to ask questions. We provide a lot of information and assistance. We don't have to do casework. And in fact, someone could have a conversation with us, a lengthy conversation with us, and they may say, I'm going to try to advocate for this on my own, or I don't want to bring it up because I fear retribution, or I'm going to call the regulatory authority instead. We will go with the direction of that person. So it may be that we're having a conversation, and it may be call us back if you need anything. So I would say let them know that we're always a resource they can call, most importantly. And I think they might have one conversation with us, they might have many, but they learn we create that relationship and we create trust. We always try to keep it professional. And sometimes we have frequent callers and we are not able to assist them. But also we have individuals who, once they know our office exists, I think one of the things we hear a lot is, I wish I would have known about you sooner. Or I wish I would have known when we were in that hospital and my loved one was getting discharged to a skilled facility in 2 hours that we had rights, kind of like Angela said.
Do you guys ever hold a town hall? I think that would be a great thing to have for every communities, because when you think of ombudsman, yeah, you think of DIA, or, oh my gosh, I'm going to get in trouble by the administrator if I say or file a complaint. I think coming from a senior living space, I didn't know much about ombudsman. I knew that you guys advocate, but I think having that education once a month, quarterly at different communities, I think that would go really, really far. And I'm going to be apologizing early for all the phone calls that you now are going to get once you start that town hall meeting. But I think it's needed. I'm always a big believer of knowledge is power, and that you have people that's got your back.
One, I think that your calls would settle down if all of the communities knew that you were going to come chirping in and letting people know that you're more available. But I do think that communities maybe aren't always on their best behavior because they're like, well, do they know that these things exist?
And now I'm thinking of everything else that you just said there and all the comments I need to make. So to that secondary part, I think that we do serve as another set of eyes, right? And I would hope, because we can go in at any given point in time. We're not the surveyor, but we can go in at any given point in time and kind of see what's going on. So I would hope that kind of defaults us to kind of just another layer of oversight in the system. But as far as communication, that is actually poor Melanie. She has been the town hall hoster. We've just started doing those in the last year. And we're starting to kind of try to roll out more communications. It's just hard. We are operating with limited resources, with limited staff, and trying to focus on the highest priority items. But this year is the year that we really are going to try to engage community, to be more intentional in communications, because you're right. There's so many people that don't even know us. They don't know how to say our name. They have no idea what we do. They think that we're the office of the state ombudsman, which is completely different, whole different functionality. So there's just a lot of education that can still be done. So we'd love to drive people to our website, because we've really been intentional in doing some marketing materials, putting some videos out there, 30-second clips, 5-minute clips that talk about involuntary discharge, facility closures, residents' rights, role of the office. We're trying, with the capacity that we have, to get out there. And so we appreciate the opportunity to come on podcasts like this and to just have, a little bit more of a voice to clarify our role and help people to understand that we're out there and we're available. Like Melanie said, if we can't help you, we'll let you know that too. But if we can help you, just a little thing can make such a huge difference in the life of someone. So we like those little wins, and we'll take those for sure any
Yes.
day of the week.
And I would say we have a volunteer program. We would love to have more volunteers in our program because they are eyes and ears also who visit more routinely than our locals are able to get out. If you can imagine 9 local ombudsmen covering over 800 long-term care facilities in the state. And they get into them, but we're often complaint based. And if we're getting out for a visit, it is trying to distribute our information, making sure, like you said, Liz, that that poster is up and that they see that face and that name. And if that person walks in the door, they might be able to put 2 and 2 together. And most often they are. Because we can't be everywhere, not only do we have our quarterly town halls on various topics, but we've started a resident and family council support meeting. And that had gone every month. We're changing that to every other month. I would say the most difficult part we're having, in addition to those limited resources, is how do we get the word out to individuals who may not have email, may not have a phone, and are dependent on the staff to learn the activities that are taking place or to know what's going on in the state. So I would agree our website is a great place. I would say facilities are doing a really great job of sharing information about our town halls and our support meetings that are coming up, because we do get residents who do attend, family members, loved ones who are attending. We're just trying to figure out how to best reach the population.
Yeah, I can understand that. We walked into a community last week because we've been trying to visit all of them. And I don't think either one of us will ever recommend this community because we rang the doorbell and we waited at the door for 10 to 15 minutes. And then we got let in by another resident. And then we stood there by ourselves, just looking around for another 10 minutes while there were residents that were, in the living room space, just in their chairs, passed out, with their heads like bent over. Just very sad. But then there were staff that were just in the kitchen area, sitting at the kitchen tables on their phones, didn't acknowledge us. What is going on here? But my fear is, who's there to complain about that? You know what I mean? Like the residents aren't complaining about that because I didn't particularly think that they would even know how or what to do. They weren't in that state. And sadly, we all know that families are not popping in and out to see their families. So it's very sad. So I would think that, okay, so you had mentioned there's volunteers that would be able to come in and do these things for you. What would that look like? Because I would love to be able to say something when I see something, but I also don't know if that would be a conflict of interest for our business and obviously shooting ourselves in our foot. I think that it could be confidential, right? You said it's very confidential. But when we're out seeing these things, is that something that you're like, well, yeah, it is what it is? Or is that something that you would want to know about of what I just explained?
I think we always encourage giving the facility an opportunity to correct the issue. So if you see something while you're there, taking it to the staff person in charge, asking them to handle it while you're there visiting. There are grievance processes and forms that can be filled out. So before we jump in and throw ourselves out there, we will ask, is there anyone that you've talked to about this? What did they do about it? Have you given them time to respond? And sometimes it's no, we haven't said anything and we'll try that. And sometimes it is, we've tried everything and they're not changing anything. And so we would always try to empower anyone to try to resolve the issue on their own. If you're there visiting, you might ask the individual, does this bother you or is this something I can bring up for you? And then mentioning it to the staff. And of course, Anyone can call our office. We always like to hear from the resident or their representative because we're going to end up going to them anyway to see if they want our help and what resolution looks like for them.
I guess that would be kind of a community at a whole. Like there was staff and the I don't know, Tasha, maybe you can speak on this too of what you observed, but that wouldn't be something that's like resident individualized. That's like they were all over there doing nothing, and then all of the staff are over here on their phones scrolling, sitting at the table.
Right.
That isn't something that's a problem. The admin was right there, the nurse was right there, so it felt like it was maybe just the culture of the space. And to us, it's like, well, we're not taking anyone there because we saw what we saw, but there's already people living there, and they're paying a lot of money to live there, and that to me is very sad.
Sometimes it's a reach out to corporate or a board, or sometimes it's a compliance hotline that they might have if they're part of a company. And sometimes you're right, that is the culture there. And before the culture would change, there may need to be a change in leadership. And that's hard. I would say that makes our roles difficult as well, wouldn't you, Angela? Because we can't fix everything either.
Yeah, I think that also the difference between assisted living, kind of like the regulatory aspect of an assisted living versus a nursing facility, they're very different. So we find even with like involuntary discharges at assisted living facilities are much more difficult to get a positive result because it's all like landlord-tenant law and processes, whereas in a nursing facility there's deadlines and there's an opportunity to go before an ALJ, and there's a whole process in place, whereas assisted living is kind of they're their own kind of creation, so it makes it harder because there's a different regulatory level at an assisted living facility, or maybe some of these other communities that you're talking about too. It makes it a little more complex.
And sometimes it's the perception that tenants and their representatives have that, they told me I would never have to move from this assisted living once I was here. Or they think that there's staff there 24/7, or that there's a nurse there 24/7. And that's not assisted living in our state. Some have staff 24/7, but usually it's a nurse on call. Sometimes if they're attached to a nursing home, it is call-outs being answered by nursing facility staff, and so you're waiting on that. So I think one of the things that individuals who are pursuing long-term care can do is ask the questions. And you may not know what questions to ask, but ask those questions. And there are some great resources out there that relate to if you're looking for a long-term care facility, these are the things that you might want to know or inquire about. And so knowing before you move in there and sign any contracts, what life might be there, what life might be like there.
Other good resources, just like if you have the individual looking for facilities or looking for a place, would be to check Dial's website for the latest survey results and kind of get a history there of how those have gone. Nursing Home 411, as well as the Nursing Home Compare site, they can give you some pretty good indicators. Nursing Home 411 really breaks down detail of like quality measures. What are their stated staffing ratios versus their actual census numbers and things like that. So I think there's a lot of organizations concerned about care and quality of care in facilities that they're really starting to try to give the consumer or family member a more clear picture of kind of operations in that facility. And remember also that Dial is an option. You can file complaints with Dial. So like if you see at a facility, you have a concern that's more broad spread than maybe just one resident or whatever, they have an 800 complaint hotline. And like I said, they're the regulatory authority. They do actual investigations into staffing issues and things like that. So I think there's, some other options also. Just remember, we're going to view it more from the resident perspective, a single resident issue, and try to work at their direction. So we're just a little different in that regard.
Yeah, that's good to know. That's good clarification. Because I think right now they think it's just kind of all, even me, I thought it was all
Yep.
encompassing. I don't know about Tasha, but well, I mean, I guess our company is one of those. Obviously, for private pay people, we are free to them because the communities pay us with those referral fees. However, we are doing our due diligence on making sure we know exactly what we're getting into. I mean, we're not just throwing 30 communities at people and saying best of luck and here's 30 options that offer, you said memory care and here's all 30 memory cares. Um, we are doing much further dives on why a place would be a good fit and why it wouldn't. And then hopefully answering all those questions. Because I do think that, what do we call it? Lying by omission. And if residents aren't asking the questions or potential residents aren't asking the questions, it's just not getting answered. So to Melanie's point of, well, they didn't ask me. You guys never asked us if there was nursing care here 24/7. And the resident just assumed that. And then they get there and find that it's not. And then the community is able to say, well, you didn't ask. There's no one asking those questions, but there's so many. It's not like we can even give them a flow chart of the things to ask because it's just not possible to have every conversation rehearsed through a bullet point of questions. And so that's, kind of what our passion or our mission is to make sure that people are going to the right community the first time and there's not one question left unanswered or unasked. So there's no confusion and problems in 2 or 3 months or a year, or whatever the case may be on the direction that they're going. Because then we have to, then there's these problems. And honestly, nobody wants to have to contact you. Even people that like conflict, they don't want to contact you either. It's just their home. They want to be comfortable. And I think that that's kind of the change that I would hope to see with communities is just making sure that they're doing the right thing. And I don't know as if that's always happening. I mean, you guys know that.
And I don't know if you went in announced or unannounced. Oftentimes our visits are unannounced, but for anyone who is looking into long-term care, we always suggest taking a tour, and I'm sure you do too. And you don't take a tour at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday when they're full staffed and all management staff are there. You go at night, you go on the weekend, you go at an off time where you actually get a feel for what is staffing going to be like, or what is the atmosphere going to be like at an off time, not during business hours.
Yeah. Oh, well, our visit of the one I was just talking about was, it was announced. We were scheduled and it still was a whole mess. So I don't want to know what it looks like unannounced.
That's unfortunate. And everyone has a bad day, right? We all realize it's the change of the seasons. Sometimes kids get sick. Sometimes we get sick. And of course, in healthcare, if you're not feeling well, we don't want you taking care of people. So we know there are those moments, but I think in any industry, first impressions are really important. And you did not have a good first impression, obviously.
No, we did not. No. Yeah, this was very helpful. Thank you guys so much for coming on. And I know it was kind of a delayed message back and forth, but this has been very helpful, even clarifying your role and who you guys are and what that looks like. So I hope to never have to contact you guys, but I know you're ready if I have a resident that needs your help.
Thank you for giving us an opportunity to kind of just explain our work. And we are willing to take that phone call. If we're not the right place, we'll redirect, but we'd rather have someone make a reach out and, on the off chance we can help them.
Yeah, or guide them in the direction they need to go.
Yep.
So yeah, that's what's great. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you, and I'm sure I'll see you around.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you guys have a great day, and yes, it was great to talk to you.
Same
All
here.
right. Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
ladies.